I've been involved in the sport my whole life. I trained in it as a kid with my friend and his dad, occasionally visiting other clubs here in town. I never gave boxing the full attention I wished I had. I did all the training, I sparred a lot, got my head, smashed in. Never got to really compete, do anything cool like go to Golden Gloves or anything like that. So about 4 or 5 years ago, my boy Anthony Pleasant, he's actually a fighter here in town as well. He said they needed a mitt man down at Evans Boxing Club, which is now debunked. It was at the bottom of the Madison House Youth Mission, but they just said they needed a guy to work mitts, and that's something I'd always been good at. Like even when I was training, we were taught to work mitts with each other, to do drills on punch mitts. So he brought me down. The head coach there had just had surgery on his shoulders, so they really didn't have anyone that could work punch mitts. So I just kind of got dragged in that way. And I didn't intend to become like a full-fledged coach. I just was helping out doing mitts with all the fighters that were down there. But the more involved I got, the more I got to know the fighters, Eventually I got reeled in, and John Rocha and Eddie Ford, the first coaches I worked alongside at Evans Boxing Club, convinced me to do the coaches clinic and, get certified under USA Boxing. So that's how that all kind of started.
When we first started, he didn't like me too much. He said that I reminded him of him when he was younger. He'd make me jump rope forever. I think he wanted me to quit.
A couple years back, we lost our club at the Mission. Head coach Benny Cooley of the Yakima War Eagles, they took what remained of the fighters we had at our club, and Benny and Eddie had known each other for years. All the clubs are actually linked in a weird way, but in the end it ended up just being me there. That's how I ended up at Eagles, and that's where I've been ever since. Grateful for it. It's a big part of my life. What boxing is, it's a discipline. So a lot of those kids that come in there, a lot of the kids that I have worked with come from the east side of town, different backgrounds, some of them a rougher background than others. Some pretty average household. It's not always like that, but quite a few of the kids I've worked with come from the east side of town and come from a difficult home life. So the discipline they learn in boxing is kind of what helps develop them mentally as they grow,
I used to get in a lot of fights, so that was like another reason why I kind of started. Let's say if there was a big problem, I could calm myself more, because I know what I can do because of boxing.
They learn a combative sport, learn to defend themselves, not to be scared or whenever they're faced with, adversity. They learned how to overcome things, like especially when it comes to if they compete, They learn more about themselves, like, oh, I can do this, like this wasn't as scary as I thought it would be. And it's a better outlet, for them to do that with, as opposed to, the alternative for a lot of the kids that I've seen in and out of there. There's gang life, there's all kinds of things, and like I'd rather, if they're gonna be combative, I'd rather them do it there than do it at school or in their neighborhoods. This is definitely an important outlet for the community. Most of the clubs that were around here started for that very purpose, kind of a community outreach thing. Right now we're at 2 days a week because it's summertime. In fall, when we are at 4 days a week, we do 2 days of cardio and then 2 days of regular, mitt work. We do different things. We have a closet full of like different boxing gear, but everyone grabs a jump rope. They do 3 rounds of jump rope, 2 minutes apiece. Sometimes I'll move it up to 3 minutes, depends on how much I want to push people that day. Everything runs in that gym on that timer you kept hearing, and it's kind of like a traffic light. So green means go, yellow you have 30 seconds of the round left, and then red you have 30 seconds rest. Then everyone does their routine, they wrap their hand. You saw everyone wrapping their hands up. Training with mouthpiece helps, so you just get used to breathing with it. So we like you guys to do everything with it while it's in. Everyone is going to compete when they get there, but in case they're interested in it. Some people change their mind. They go in there without the intention of, oh, I just want to learn how to box. I don't really want to compete though. But then they change their mind as soon as they get more into it. My thing was being a mitt man. Like that's really that's my best way of teaching, because that way they can kind of mirror me, what I'm doing. Whether they're orthodox or a southpaw, right-handed, left-handed, I can teach them how to stand. Every coach is different. There's some coaches that can, stand right over you. They can make you stand in front of a heavy bag and just kind of correct you. They can use a noodle to, smack you in the face if you're not keeping your hands up. I had a coach use a yardstick on me once, I'm not joking. It was terrifying, but it made me keep my hands up. So once they have the routines down, it's easier to work with. We try to switch things up though, like we'll do different footwork drills. We have cones, doing little like running back style drills. In boxing, as weird as it sounds, your feet are just as important as your hands. To move around the ring gracefully is a very key factor in a fight.
It was just more from like my cousin. I was not very good at any other sports, so I was like, I want to just try it out. I liked it, so I just kept coming.
I think with boxing, compared to other sports in general, it's really difficult to sell it, whereas like football, basketball, like team sports. It's hard to teach boxing like a karate class or anything, like to have people stand in uniform, like just all in unison, like throwing the same punches. Like no one's really, in my opinion, really develops that way in boxing. Like it's best to work with them individually. That's what we do, so I think that's why it's always a hard selling point. Hopefully like they like boxing enough that they stick with it. I've met some kids who didn't have any natural ability with it, but they worked super hard and got better. The whole hard work beats talent when talent fails to work, Like that, I've met a lot of kids with that philosophy who followed through on that. And then there were just some kids who were gifted, just natural athletes that could pick up anything and just run with it. That usually is the hard sell to parents, depending on the person's parents. They want to see, oh, he better be a Golden Gloves champ, within like a month or whatever, and that's not always the case. I've met kids that it took like year and a half to really find skill set as a boxer, whether it's being an inside fighter, whether it's just being a power puncher, there's just so many different ways to go with that. We don't make you spar, you choose. You tell us when you want to spar, but we provide headgear. The mouthpiece is a big part of that. I always assure the parents that we're not going to let them kill each other. We're not going to let them get in that ring and just go to town. Sparring is an exercise. It's weird. It's always hard to explain because essentially it's like a practice fight. But the point of sparring is they're all teammates essentially. It's not to hurt them. It's, learn what your weak points are and what your strong points are and what you need to work on. So essentially, like when I put people into the spar, I want them to spar to each other's level to learn from each other, but not to treat it as a prize fight, an actual prize. And that's what I explain to parents about sparring. And it's their choice. We're not just gonna throw you in there. It's not a dog ring or anything like that, Today you were there, it was just me and Benny. Tracy handles a lot of the paperwork, the stuff that we need for our fighters, like getting their books, getting them registered under USA Boxing when they're ready to compete. Francisco's really good with the youngins. He's like the 8 to 12-year-olds, Me, I think I'm better with the teenagers. I'd love to have more people volunteer to help at the same time. Like every club needs more coaches. That's one thing I've learned, and just all the clubs I've seen around town, like you can always use an extra coach, an extra set of hands. Someone who knows the sport and loves the sport enough. I wouldn't mind seeing it grow a little bit more, but my main thing is the lack of manpower we have from our end as coaches. We're not paid for this, we do this voluntarily, but obviously as you can see, we love the sport, so that's why that's a reward in itself, is seeing these kids succeed and move on to other things, whether they become pro fighters or go to college or join the military. To see that they've learned that discipline and have that instilled in them, and it helps them grow, that's rewarding enough. I would like everyone out there just to know that we're here, that boxing's still around, and still preparing that next generation of fighters, whether they fight in the Olympics or just fight in national and Golden Glove tournaments and go pro. We're still here, and it's still a great program, especially in the inner cities. I think it's a really good outlet for these kids to take their frustration from everyday life and use it on a heavy bag or in a sparring session or just use it to learn. I'd love to see the program grow, but I would definitely like to see more former fighters or people that grew up in the sport like myself just work with these kids and keep the sport alive, mainly. With the MMA scene taking over so much, like it's been kind of an on and off scene, but I just hope the program stays around, like whether it grows more or stays how it is. I just want it to stay around. I want it to be an option.